welcome, and our agenda is included in your packet. What we will then get started in doing is introduce both us from ETS and the WDE colleagues I have here as well. My colleague to my left is Rebecca Rabin-Reed, also with ETS. And both Rebecca and I will be tag teaming this presentation and going through all the slides that you have in front of you. From the WDE, we have the notable Deb Lindsay with us, and there will be many a time that she'll be speaking with us during the presentation. And in a very far back, if we can just get a show of hands, we have Emily Brantz and Michelle Carroll on the slide, but not here today with us, Jessica Steinbrenner. Jessica is the supervisor of assessment at the WDE. So with that, we're going to get started. And I'm going to hand it over to Rebecca.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming and coming back this year. Very much appreciated by all of our team. Again, my name is Rebecca Rabin-Reed, and I work at ETS on mostly SAWS, but also PAWS program. So I'm just going to go over this first slide with all of you right now. And what's new for 2015. You can see it's not a huge list, it's pretty small. So we're happy to say that we haven't had any major and or significant changes to either PAWS and or SAWS administrations. You can see that this year the Wyoming ALT assessments is not administered through ETS, that's a different vendor. And if you have questions about that, I would suggest contacting WDE. Probably the ladies in the back. Emily is probably your best contact for any ALT information this year. And so for PAWS, there are no formula sheets allowed this year. We're not providing them, and they are not allowed. And then SAWS, there's no significant changes. We're still doing the same grades 3, 5, and 7.
The schedule this year. This too isn't going to be that vastly different from last year's schedule.
There you go.
And if we can just go through these dates here. So the pre-ID window for PAWS has officially closed on Monday. And what that means to you is that you should have already been in the TOM system and making any changes or additions to your demographic information for your students. And once that window closes, we actually cannot make any more changes from that point forward. So that allows us now back at ETS to now start preparing all the materials that are going to be coming to you, which is February 23rd. So your PAWS testing materials will start to be received in the schools by that date. I would actually say that that is a end date. You will actually perhaps even start seeing things trickle in that week, if you would. I don't recall what day of the week the 23rd is, but it's very likely you could be starting to get boxes coming to your facility the 20th, the 21st, etc. And then, as you also know, or you should know, your testing window begins March 2nd and concludes March 27th. That date, March 27th, is very important because that date is indeed the last date for testing, and that includes makeups. So you have to ensure that your schedule is set, that does allow wiggle room for makeups. All of you that have been through this before know well enough that you will get the people that will have left midway or sick or coming into your district within that window and now need to test. You will need to have that time in your schedule to allow for makeup so that all testing is concluded by March 27th. Pause for effect. Okay. So then the last day to ship materials back to us at ETS is April 1st. And again, just stating it exactly as it's worded. That means that is the last day that it physically leaves your building. We don't need it by April 1st, although we'd love to have it by April 1st. That is the last day you ship it to us, is by April 1st. The SAWS schedule is pretty much identical, but staggered, obviously, and is relative to the SAWS testing window, with the exception, of course, of the pre-ID window, which already, again, has closed. So the TOM system, as it relates to the students, doesn't necessarily differentiate demographic data between PAWS and SAWS, which is why that window is the same for both. However, then your materials for SAWS will start coming into the schools by April 6th. Your test window is the 13th to May 1st. That asterisk applies the same caveat that I just stated for PAWS is applicable for SAWS. You do need to ensure that you have adequate makeup time built into your schedule so that you are so that you have completely finished testing inclusive of your makeup students by May 1st. And then again, the last day that those materials can leave your site being shipped back to ETS is May 6th. One last slide on the schedule, and I'll hand it over to Rebecca, is our supplemental order window. Those of you that are new to being an administrator in any fashion, what a supplemental order window means for us is that you need additional materials that did not come with your shipment. This could be in the variety of new students that have now come to you since the 684 or since the pre-ID window closed that are now not accommodated for. It could be special forms that were not necessarily correct on the 684, therefore you don't have that special form, so now you need to order one. So that is what the supplemental order window means, and this is how you're going to go about doing it. And again, these are the dates that are applicable for both PAWS and SAWS. February 2nd is the first available date that you can place a supplemental order for PAWS. You can no longer place any supplemental orders for your PAWS materials after March 16th. And that is firm, hard, no negotiation. Same with SAWS. Most often, we will take that supplemental order via phone call, and that phone number up there has not changed, and it continues to be the dedicated Wyoming call center. We have dedicated Wyoming support representatives there that are exclusive and doing just the Wyoming program for you guys, handling these kinds of things, including your supplemental orders. You can also reach that group anytime for any question via email, and that email address is up here. We will continue to emphasize using this support center as often as possible, whether it be for a question, whether it be to place an order, whether it be to just you have something difficult that came up and you don't know how to get about it. Okay, so we want your first line of support, when applicable, to be that Wyoming Support Center, and they are who you are going to call for your supplemental orders during these dates only, right? Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Rebecca.
Okay, so I'm going to go over the billing coordinator responsibilities for before testing. So we've broken this out very similarly to how we've always done, with a before testing, a during testing, and then an after testing. So we think this kind of flows well, and so the first thing that we need you guys to do is then schedule a training with your test administrators, and that should include, you know, this information, how to administer a test, how to return materials, inventory materials, all of that stuff. And then all students that are within the TOMS system, that's the database system, will receive a pre-ID label. You need to make sure that those labels are affixed either to the answer document or the test and answer book. You need to allow ample time to do that. They do come as labels, and they do need to be affixed, so that does require some time. So just make sure to schedule for that as well. And then inventory all of your materials, and then review the directions for administration for both PAWS and SAWS. This is a sample of what is called a shipping notice, and this is for your entire shipment. So this is an inventory, well, you can use this to inventory your materials if you want. If you have a better, different system, that's up to you, and that's fine. You can use this. This is for your entire shipment. So all of your PAWS materials are going to come at once, and you will receive this sheet within those materials. The next is what's called a box contents sheet. This is actually the contents within each box. Each box should have one of these. So if it's easier for you to use the box contents sheet, then go ahead and use that. It might be easier to supply one box for a classroom, and then this would be easier. You can see the serial number ranges over here. Those are in the packages that are shrink wrapped. So it should be easy to kind of go through, and then you can see the quantity within each. Alrighty. This is test security agreement form. This is a sample. Test security agreement forms are good for up to 1 year. You can discard the ones that you currently have, and you will need to get new ones signed. We've updated the form with bullet number 11, and we'll get into that on the next slide. And so anybody who's touching your materials, and that's anybody who's touching your materials, that's the janitor who picks them up, that's whoever locks them up, that's whoever disseminates them, that's your test administrators, that's you. Anybody who touches them needs to sign a test of security agreement form. This is kept on site. ETS does not need this back. This is for your own so-called protection, if you will. If you have any questions about what was done in the testing room, if there was a violation of this test security agreement form, you can then go back to that person who signed it and say, you signed all of this, you recognize that this was what was needed, in case you need to then go and audit anything at your sites. So I'm going to call out number 11, and that's just the addition this year. And then it's just an understanding of the consequences of not following the security agreement form. And we'll get into the so-called consequences a little bit later on when we go over test security in the test security section. And then, so with your materials, you do receive a 10% overage. So make sure to keep that in mind before you place a supplemental order. And that comes with your entire shipment. And so if you do need more materials, always give us a call. The customer service reps will place the order on your behalf, and then it'll be shipped out to you. And then before testing, you will need to distribute your test materials to test administrators. And then work with the test administrators on the testing environment. And for students who receive accommodations, you will need to schedule that in advance as to what those accommodations are, the testing environment for those students, a plan for day of testing. And then we also want you to ensure that each test section is followed. So for both PAWS and SAWS, there is a section 1, a section 2, and a section 3 within the test books. So it's important that the students follow section 1, section 2, section 3, because we don't want them going back and forth through the book. So you don't want to start with section 3 and then go back to section 1. They may have seen an item coming up. So it's important to follow that sequence. So special forms. We have, these have not changed since last year. And these are the special forms provided for PAWS, and then the special forms provided for SAWS. Large print, audio, English and Spanish for PAWS, and then Braille. And then SAWS is just large print, audio, Spanish, and Braille. And these all come in packets. So there will be a standard version test booklet within this packet, because the materials do need to be transcribed when they're returned back to us. So for PAWS on special forms, student responses must be transferred, I use the word transcribed, into a standard test and answer booklet or answer sheet. And that's the same for SAWS as well. And then also you need to mark the appropriate box on the answer document or test booklet to recognize the student took a special form. And that indicates to us that the student used Braille. We can't receive and then scan and score an actual Braille book. So this is why we need it transcribed. SAWS, we do know that there is an audio Spanish version. It does not mean the students should be writing in Spanish when they use that version. We do need all responses in English to score them for SAWS. And responses all must be, again, transcribed into a standard version test and answer booklet. So the pre-ID labels. The labels, again, are provided to you based on the students that were in TOMS, which comes from the 684 file from the WDE to us. Labels are actually shipped to you outside of the material shipment. It comes within the same window. It's just not going to be in that first big PAWS and or SAWS shipment. It's a separate box. So just be on the lookout for it. And the labels will come, PAWS has 4 labels, SAWS has 2 labels. So for grades 6 through 8, you technically need 1 label. And you don't need to use the other 3, they can be destroyed on site. And SAWS, you also need 1 label, and the extra 1 can be thrown away, destroyed. For PAWS grades 3 through 5, you will have separate test and answer booklets, so you will need 3 separate labels for the PAWS booklets. And a pre-ID roster is also provided within that shipment, so you can see all the students that have labels. And the, oh.
You know, are the labels based on the
Microphone.
Oh.
Sorry. Do you know if the labels are based on the October 684 or the updates that we may have just done in TOMS?
October.
Mike?
October.
Yeah, both.
Both. So that's a good point. Thank you so much. So it's the October 684. The demographic window for TOMS just closed on the 26th. Whatever was done prior to the 26th is on your pre-ID label. So, so answer documents, like I mentioned, PAWS, grades 6 through 8, they have answer documents. It has all 3 sessions on there, reading, math, and science on 1 document. And then remind the test administrators that an answer document actually travels with the student within their school. So if you're testing reading on day 1 in classroom A, and then math on day 2 in classroom B, and then science again on day 3 in the other classroom, that answer document follows that student where they go within the school.
So all you do is have an answer booklet. So the answer booklet goes to the student, and everything is entered in the answer booklet.
Yes.
Including reading and. Okay.
Yes. So for grades 3 through 5 for PAWS, there is a test and answer booklet, and that is their booklet. So they have 1 for reading, they have 1 for math, and they have 1 for science. That's why you need the 3 pre-ID labels for PAWS, grades 3 through 5. You need to know what's going into your testing rooms and what's coming back out of your testing rooms each day of testing. So that's give it to them on the day of testing, make sure you know what's in those rooms, receive it back the day of testing, and make sure you received all the materials back. We have plenty of fun and cute little anecdotal stories about students going home with their test books because, oh, I didn't finish my section, and so I'm just going to do it at home. And the materials obviously weren't inventoried the right way. So here's a sample of the SAWS grades 6 through 8 answer document and a sample of the pre-ID label. So this year we did an upgrade, and unfortunately it only caught on the answer document. The test books get a little bit trickier, I suppose. You can see the label on the box. It says place pre-ID label here. So the text from the label goes exactly the same direction as the text that says place the pre-ID label here. So this is PAWS grades 6 through 8 answer doc. So here we have a sample of the actual test booklet for PAWS and SAWS grades 3 through 5. SAWS, yes. Well, the PAWS, anyway. So this is what a test and answer booklet will look like on the demographic page and where you will put the pre-ID label. And unfortunately, for the test booklets, we couldn't get that place the label here. We will be, if I'm looking at Deb, we will be sending something out with a clarification prior to testing very soon with a little bit more information as to where these labels go on the test and answer booklets. So a quick and easy way to just kind of remember is that you can see there's a scan barcode at the bottom here, and the numbers go in this sequence. So if you flip the pre-ID label that Lauren's holding a sample of, and you have the numbers on the barcode on the label follow in the same sequence, that up and down order, on the test and answer book, that's where it goes.
Okay, so you're talking about the sections for reading, math, and science, and there's section 1, 2, and 3. What if a student misses section 1? Do they do section 2 at the class on the next testing day, and then they have to make up that first section, or do they do section 1 first?
Very good question, and something that we will get into a little bit later. Okay, so.
There's no right answer. Preferably, we always want the answer to be that the student takes the sections in the prescribed order. However, if your schedule does not preclude to being able to have that student sit for a makeup of section 1 before you then have the entire classroom starting section 2, then that's a judgment call that you have to make to keep your schedule also going. And so that's not ideal for that one exception, but that's what you need to do. So it is ultimately a judgment call, but know that our preference and our recommendation is always to try to do whatever you can do to ensure that they do stay in the prescribed order. But we know that schedules are what they are, and your staff is what they are. That can't always be the case, and that's fine. But treat that as an exception, if you would.
I think we had another question down here.
Is there a cutoff date for students who move into the district on which you have to test them? I assume it's probably the 16th, since that's the last date to order supplemental materials.
Very good question, and I'm actually going to hand it over to the WDE for that one.
So there is an urban legend in this not-so-urban state that says that a student who arrives after a certain date in the test window need not be tested. And that is a not-so-urban legend. The truth is, anybody who is enrolled in a tested grade in your school district during the test window should be tested. There is no magical date after which a student can not be tested. Now that said, we often get questions like, what if I get a student in the second to the last day of the testing window? Should I test him? And the answer is, that depends on the student, how well he's situated in your new school. Depending on the student, if I were a principal, if I were the building coordinator, whoever makes such decisions in your school, I would say, is it really the best way to welcome a brand new student to our district and our school to say, hey, I'm so glad you're here. Guess what? We have a 6-hour test for you. Have a seat. You may not want to do that, and that's okay. All of the accountability determinations for schools are based on your 684 data. The spring 684 count is on the 20th of March this year. Any student who is in your school at the beginning of the, in the fall, at the fall 684 count, and is on your spring 684 count on March 20th, counts for you in terms of accountability. All of those students will be in the denominator when we calculate participation rates. So at the same time, though, students should be tested if they're enrolled in your in your school during the test window, whether they're there on those 2 days or not. So it's really only the last few days of the test window where you need to ask yourself the question, is it really worth the kind of relationship building that I need to do with the student and his family to test them or not? If they're brand new to your school and it's the last few days of the test window, you won't be held accountable, quote unquote, for making sure that that student is included in your participation rate. But depending on who that student is, he may very well jump right into things and do just fine. So that's your judgment call. Any other questions on that?
Thanks, Deb.
Yep.
Question up,
Okay.
not related to that.
This is kind of the opposite, but I know a few kids who are maybe moving prior to the test window, or being moved in the middle of the test window, what do we do with kids who move prior, what we do with books, and then what do we do if they move in the middle of it?
So I can answer for students who move before your testing window. So before your testing window, then you just don't use their pre-ID labels, don't return them, just destroy them on site, and they're not within your count. Okay. So that's that. For moving within the testing window, I think it gets a little more complicated.
Not the same answer.
But it's, yeah, either.
So
No,
the...
that's just for the camera.
So, sorry, I'm really not very coordinated. I have to use two hands? Oh, no. So the answer is very much the same as the other answer. And the question is, how long does a student remain with you through that test window? If the student is with you for the first 2 weeks of the test window, then it seems logical to me that you would begin testing that student with the rest of the students in your class, in your school, in your grades. And work out the test booklet. So say a student transfers from, I don't know, Rock Springs to Jackson, and that student is transferring in-state, then talk with the building coordinator in Jackson to make sure that the folks in the receiving school know what portions of the test the student has already taken, so he doesn't have to retake the entire test when he gets to Jackson. So just communicate with, sending and receiving schools should communicate with each other about what portions of the test have already been taken. You would return materials for the portion of the test he already took with you. You do not send those test materials snail mail to Jackson. Please do not do that. That would be a major violation of test security. So return the portion of the test that the student took while he was with you, and communicate with the receiving school so they know what portion to begin with when he arrives there. Thanks.
Does that answer?
Does that help? That answers? Okay, good. Yeah.
So what you're saying is, so what if a child does math and that's all he did in your school, you send that part in? What about if he, well, I had a student last year that did part of it, and then I didn't use both booklets, I used one of them, and one of them I didn't use. So I sent the one I did use back with surplus, whatever, and then I sent it to grade. Sometimes that confuses the scorers because they're looking for two booklets. You need to make a note with that.
Don't worry about us.
Yeah. Despite every best effort, we do anticipate that exact scenario happening, and that's why as long as the answer doc or the test booklet is properly recorded with the student's Wiser ID, we reconcile back at ETS. Okay? I have to though say that sounded really easy, and it's not always. So if you can then be sure as a quality control check that you do in fact confirm that Wiser ID is the right Wiser and it's been bubbled correctly before sending it back. And that goes for everyone. Anytime you know that you have a split, in the example that Deb brought up, or this gentleman here, and you know that inevitably, despite best efforts, we are going to end up with multiple answer docs for one student, we really need your quality control and your eyes on that before sending it back. What we can't reconcile, if there is an error, whether it be just a silly, bubbling error, it then becomes very difficult for us to reconcile two answer docs to one student's score. If in fact that Wiser ID got bubbled in wrong, or they now thought they had a different Wiser ID, or they then ended up using a different name, which, believe me, for some reason happens a lot. So that's where we need you and your engagement in that process. But assuming everything is error-free coming in, we reconcile and it's fine. But as Deb said, the onus to ensure that that does happen nice and neatly is the communication and the coordination between the two different testing sites. If they've split testing math in one school and reading another, or math and reading in one and science in another, kind of a thing. Go ahead. You have that, so it's better.
It seems like every year we get a call in July, they're looking for maybe one of our special forms. Will there be information as to how we ship those? Do they go back with the other? Seems like that's a yearly question for us.
Yes, so we will get into returning documents, but this did come up before, and it will come up when we go over test security as well, is that last year we did get a little overly excited before we reconciled all of our materials back at ETS. We have what like a 3 kind of point touch on reconciliation of students and materials. And so we did communicate a wee bit early to sites last year about missing materials and missing special forms. It's our business, it's what we do. It's kind of, you know, in our blood that we do there. And so early intervention, if you will, allow me, is kind of where we're at. We're nervous Nellies by nature. You have a question for me?
Just to clarify, if a student moves out of state in the testing window and they haven't completed, that book is just destroyed. It's not.
They're pre-ID.
Their pre-ID is
Yeah,
destroyed.
and you can return their, sorry. And then you can return their materials in non-scorables.
And non-scorables. And so like if we have like 3 students who've already moved before, they're going to get pre-IDs, but they moved months ago. Those are, we can destroy those.
Yes.
Instead. Okay.
Yes. Oh.
So if they didn't take any portion of the test.
Correct. If they moved out of state and they took at least one portion of the test, you return that.
For scoring.
For scoring. That's an example of how Deb described what you're accountable for in your numbers. So that student, even though they're moving out before the conclusion of testing window, was on your 684. So therefore, we want to start whatever we have to score and score. We realize it might not be a complete score, obviously. That student might not care about their individual student report, or what we call the ISR, because they've moved out of state. But we want to have that in play, in process, because they started and they were originally on the 684 file. So we want to score whatever we have.
Thanks, Lauren.
So that student who moves out of state takes, say, the reading and doesn't take the math or science, or doesn't take the math, we send that booklet in. Would that count against our participation? Would that count as a below basic because they don't have any answers?
Oh, for math and science.
Excellent question, and no, that would actually come as a not tested scenario. So it's not a 0, it's not a score of 0, it's actually going to be a null value. So how that plays into the numerator, I don't know.
For math and science.
For math and science.
Right, so the magic date is the March 20th date. If the student was with you at your fall count and remains with you with no more than 10 days of interrupted enrollment in your school through March 20th, then you are accountable for that student. I realize that a lot of districts schedule their spring breaks during the middle of the test window, something which has been rather mysterious to me for the 2.5 years I've been here. But nonetheless, if a student leaves after March 20th, you are accountable for that student. If, say, it's a 4th grade student, we would expect a student who was with you in the fall and again on March 20th, 684s, we would expect to see a score in reading, math, and science for that student. And all 3 of those scores, a student counts essentially in participation 3 times if she's in 4th grade. So if she only takes reading, because that's all you've gotten through by the time she moves after March 20th, then you lose points in the accountability system for the 2 tests she did not take, but that we expected her to take by March 20th.
We're getting any more questions?
We're going to move on.
Yeah, we're going to move on.
That's right.
So the question was, they actually had a student last year who went out sick and was sick for most of the testing window, but because it was doctor excused, it wasn't interrupted 10 days excused. So they wouldn't drop the student per se like you would a normal student if they're gone truancy-wise type thing. So then you would just still return that and that would just go against your accountability is what I'm understanding?
Can I confirm? Yes.
Yes. It's me for during.
Oh. Okay, any other questions before we move forward to during testing? All right, let's go.
And don't forget, we have another section, again, for more Q&A. So I'm going to handle during testing. So with everything that we've just covered on what you've done before testing, now you should be in testing mode, things working swimmingly, and no issues, no problems, no complaints, right? The biggest responsibility you all have during the window of testing is to be tracking the testing experience itself and ensure that it goes smoothly. When it doesn't, we then work with a form that we call the Irregularity Report Form, IRR. Again, everything, and I should have mentioned this up front, everything that Rebecca and I are covering is in excruciating detail in the building coordinator manual. In essence, it is the content of how we create these slides. So if you miss anything about what we discuss on an IRR, that is also going to be, again, covered in detail in your building coordinator manual. So when you come up with an instance that would be IRR worthy, we recommend and prefer that you do engage and notify your district coordinator. That's not mandatory, but it certainly helps downstream. Should that then be a particular incident that many individuals have to be involved, or we have to investigate and do extensive research, we will have to then inevitably involve the district coordinator. So it just helps if you do that up front, and it can be in that point the district coordinator that then sends the IRR to us at ETS. It doesn't have to be, or you might be wearing both hats. You're the building coordinator and the district coordinator. That's fine too. But preferably, you want to engage and get the district coordinator involved before you send that along. Send it to us, and then, next slide. You probably are asking yourself, what are the types of different irregularities that I should be documenting or noting on said form? I would call these categories, if you would. Think of these as 4 categories that would be an example of what could be included as an irregularity, but not necessarily exclusively limited to these. First and foremost is when and probably one of the more common ones, is a testing administrator or proctor enabled an accommodation that was not to be given. So they were not eligible based on their IEP or 504 for said accommodation, but yet they received one. We want to know that. That needs to be documented and documented on the IRR and sent to us immediately. Also, in a more common category, but not necessarily that happens a lot, is students cheating or copying. And we can talk later when we talk about test security about some of these different examples. But obviously, a cheating example, and those of you that have been doing this for years, is usually pretty obvious and it's very blatant. These days, more so than ever, it might involve a cell phone. So they're engaging with their phone, or they're looking at their phone, and there's a picture of the test on their phone. That is absolutely, glaringly an incident of cheating. Inappropriate test preparation is a more ambiguous category, and one that we will and probably want to discuss, and I'm going to encourage you when we get to the Q&A slides, if you have examples that you're not sure count, let's bring them up here and now and discuss. But this would be anything from a blatant teacher having had access to the testing booklets prior to testing and seeing what's on the test and now actually teaching to the test, or job aids or teaching aids and or particular equations or particular passages, i.e., certain text left in a room intentionally, that even though someone did a sweep in taking and was supposed to take down various teaching aids from a room that's being used for testing, and then someone comes in and it's back up, that's cheating. That is, in this instance, an example of a teacher giving unfair, inadequate test preparation for those students. And then overall security breaches, again, leaving the test books open, leaving the test books in an unsecured location, having students leave and or travel with their test booklet. These would be some obvious security breaches. So these obviously are, again, concrete, very specific examples. We know that it doesn't always fall so neatly into those categories, and we'll want to talk about that as we move on. But let's talk about how you can be responsible in ensuring that these incidents or examples do not happen. Obviously, the #1 responsibility is keeping the test materials secure at all times. So when we are testing, those testing materials are there, and when you are not, we assume they are back in their locked room, not available or accessible to students. It sounds obvious, I know, but we know there's a lot of anecdotal, crazy stories we hear every time we come out and doing these trainings and people share. So again, being here and hearing this training, you are now officially warned and being part of the community that's going to be in charge of those test materials. If a student becomes ill, and we already started getting at this with how you schedule the makeups and that type of thing, again, be thinking of the security as it relates to keeping those test materials secure and the exposure of the test booklet as you then prepare and deal with makeups for when a student becomes ill. Obviously, also, if a student has such an illness that excrement, perhaps, has been expired into the answer doc, or blood has come onto the answer doc, that is certainly something that you need to document, because that that answer doc now needs to be destroyed, and we now need to continue to get this kid back in and finish testing. We do not want contaminated answer documents back to ETS. We just don't. Wait, no, don't, stay there. So we've got a lot of questions. We were in Afton a couple of days ago doing the same training, and water damage, though, did come up as an example. And that is obviously something that can happen. They're perhaps being allowed to keep their bottle of water in front of them while they test. That I'm going to ask that you have to use your judgment. If the part of the answer doc, specifically in the answer doc for 6 through 8, it's the bubbles, or if it's the test answer booklet for a lower grade student and it's where they actually wrote the answer, if that has been rippled to the point or blurred to the point because of water damage that we cannot read it and or scan it, then that is actual contamination, and we need to go through this process. If a drop of water happened to the upper corner of the page and or to the bottom edge, or the side edge rather, it doesn't seem to have affected anything, no, you're fine. Send that in. It's just a drop of water. Where we need to scan, we'll scan. So that is a little bit more ambiguous. Even if, though, it's blood on the upper right-hand corner of the page and it's just a drop of blood, do I want that back? No. So that, really, it's only with water that you can use that discretion. Other bodily fluids, no. What is a big bummer, big bummer, is this other sentence. That should then happen, you guys are responsible to transfer any responses that have been made thus far to a clean document. I know it stinks, I'm sorry. But I have no other way to get about that. You don't want us doing it, because at that point it's left and we can't do that accurately and for the student. So that, again, those of you that have been doing this for a long time, you just have to know inevitably these things do happen and you have to plan for them somehow. So again, I already mentioned destroying on site any contaminated materials. We do not want them back. Now we can go to the next slide. So this is an example of the irregularity report. This is also in your building coordinator manual, and this has not changed one iota from last year. So for those of you that have been doing this before, same process, same form, no change. For those of you that are new to this, find this in your building coordinator manual. Make sure you refer to it up close before you leave here today. Should you have any questions, we're here to answer those. So during testing, questions now is the fun part.
Okay, so do we still have different forms? Okay, so if we
yes.
have different forms, then what if we don't have an extra one? If we need a form 7 and somebody has a contaminated booklet, what do we do with that if we don't have an extra?
Excellent question. We get that every year, and we get that also in the call center a lot. The first place you want to look is your overage.
Right.
And see if you actually have that particular form. If not, you want to hope that it's still within the supplemental window, and you're going to call ETS and get that particular form ordered and sent to you next day.
And if it's not?
You're going to have that kid test again. New form. The question was, if I can't replicate the same form, and all I have, or it's after the supplemental window, what I would do is have that kid test using another form, but Rebecca might have another answer.
I would give us a call at the call center.
And we might work some magic.
I got pixie dust.
But that's a secret. That's one of the training benefits. Oh, now it's being recorded, darn it.
I apologize for the simplicity of this question. What can be posted in the rooms up on the walls?
And that is not a silly question at all. So the WDE's website does have up on there a link already for allowable resources. And that is where I'm going to point you to. First and foremost, check that link, get that document under allowable resources. That being said, for discussion, page 73 in the building coordinator manual as well. Thank you. Hold on. So one thing that we know and that we get asked all the time is word walls. No. Simply put, technically speaking, we would allow them and they are okay for reading. They are definitely not okay for writing in SAWS. And so I would just have them eliminated altogether. Why even be confused and get yourself questioning whether or not they're good or bad? Just take them down. Equations on a whiteboard or blackboard during the math test. Allowed? No. Okay. So anything that is going to be specifically covered by the test is not allowed in the room. And when you think about reading and writing in particular, that can be pretty vague, right? And so you do have to then have that very discerning and conservative eye and conservative approach in thinking that through. Follow-on question coming up.
I may have misheard. I heard you say word wall was allowed for reading but not for writing, but the manual says the opposite.
That's funny. Well then, I'm going to say no word walls. Period. Yeah. So, Rebecca's looking. You might have another errata. I know, I believe you.
It does say word walls.
Okay. So this had already been vetted in what's in the building coordinator usually rules. So I would say that goes. But I would again encourage, for the lack of confusion and or ambiguity, no word walls in either.
Our question would be whether or not in the 3, 4, 5 student books, can they underline and leave that there without being tagged for erasures? And in the 6, 7, 8 books, can we underline again this year?
So the question about underlining. For grades 3 through 5, oh, another question. I'll stay up here. But I need Rebecca. So I'm getting my exercise. For 6 through 8, they can underline in there, but it's not going to have any bearing.
Right, so grades 6 through 8, they can underline in their test and answer booklets because those are non-scorable materials. I believe grades
3 through 5.
3 through 5.
We say no.
We say no underlining.
Okay, she doesn't like that answer. I'm back up. But again, yeah, I have to probably also check there the building coordinator manual. Yeah.
For clarification though, on the reading test, the reading documents themselves. The text is on opposite pages of the answer bubble ins. And we teach our kids throughout the state, I know we do this, we teach them close reading to underline and circle what's going to help them answer those questions. So if the test questions are on the opposite pages of the text, can they not underline? Or
can they underline?
Can they underline in the 3, 4, 5 books?
So in general and in principle, one of the reasons why we say no is because anything marked in that book, the same way a test answer is marked, affects how it's scanned. So in principle, we say no. Do they and can it and will it still pass? Yes. So that's my answer. I see Rebecca scheming over there with Deb if we're going to change that answer. So the ETS official answer is we do not like any other markings besides the answer in the test answer booklet because it affects how it is scanned and then therefore downstream in the system. It's very sophisticated scanning software. ETS has it, and so again we try to be as perfect as possible. That being said, we know what happens and we get them in, and it's a risk. But because, as you know, we lay out those pages intentionally for eliminating and mitigating that risk. And if they did it last year and you didn't have us like freak out, that's your answer. And WDE wants to research a little bit more on that anyway, and we'll post something more formal as well.
Okay, my question is dealing with erasures. We had a student last year that started his test, got mixed up, got a number off, did the entire test, and had to go back and erase every answer and start from the point where they were. They had to just start moving answers up. And we were tagged for, wrong to right answer percentage. Mm-hmm. And so how do we overcome it? Do we do an irregularity form on that so that we don't get tagged?
I can never guarantee that you won't get tagged. That's the bad news of that answer. The good news is that upon an investigation, should you be tagged, you're fine. So the reason why, and we'll talk about this, and I have a formal section in our presentation under test security for Deb to describe more in detail about erasure analysis. But if this is happening during testing, what I want you to be sure is that you actually have that kind of an answer weighing against what your options are. So for the simplicity of what that student needed to do to move forward was to do exactly that. He erased, he continued, but as a result, with such significant erasures from wrong to right, that will come absolutely in how we run the analysis on erasure analysis. If you are 100% confident in being able to defend that action, then that is still probably the preferable way to go. If you are not and or have any concerns and or it wasn't as crystal clear, another option is to start with a new clean test answer document. Not ideal. That interrupts that student's testing experience greatly and probably would have negative consequences for those reasons, but that's an option. And I would say no matter what, yes, you do need, and it is absolutely a great example of getting an irregularity report over to ETS. No matter what, out of any of those scenarios, that would be a great IRR. Before I walk down, any more questions up here? Yes. And again, we're on the during testing section.
On the math test, in place of scratch paper, can students use dry erase boards at their desk?
That's a WDE policy question.
I had a teacher ask me.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think I want ETS to weigh in on that. And I'm going to bring that down to Deb. Deb, did you hear the question?
Yeah.
Yes, I did hear the question, although at first I thought you said on the map test. And I thought, well, but this isn't about the map. So if you want to use whiteboards in the math section of the map test, go right ahead.
But that's not.
But that isn't what, in fact, you asked. So it would be our preference that students use scratch paper. That's what we use for students, scratch paper. The dry erase board, it might be that students are accustomed to writing larger on the dry erase board, and so potentially their peers sitting next to them might be able to read what they've written on the whiteboard. So please use scratch paper, because that is how we've asked students to do it across the entire state. And we're focusing on standardized administration of the assessment.
Great. I think consistency is always a rule of thumb that you can apply for yourselves when you have any of these other kinds of situations that come up. Consistently, what is the rule? Therefore, that's how I want to answer. When you get, in fact, those kind of questions from teachers or other proctors.
We do have clarification for you on the underlining. So on the WDE website, they have a frequently asked questions section, and on there under PAWS, it does say that students can underline with the number 2 pencil. So I remember from last year that the students can underline, even in the SAWS administration as well, but they cannot highlight. So highlighters are not allowed, but underlining is okay. Thanks for that.
Great.
Yeah.
And note to us, use that frequently asked questions section off the WDE website as often as you need. There's obviously some good questions that we logged from last year there. And so we'll continue to expand upon that. Other questions for during testing section?
Okay, if we block the amount of time that's recommended for, say, the reading test, section 1, and they do not complete it when that time is up, can they take it, can they start it the next day, or do they have to stay until that test is done that day?
So from a test security standpoint, what do you think I would answer?
I'm guessing that you have to complete section 1. So if they're 3/4 of the way done, then they're just incomplete.
Can you allow them to stay?
That's how we're
Yes.
trying to block our schedule.
Yeah. So what I don't want to have happen is section 1 being exposed to that student. They do not finish and they go home, and they shouldn't really be allowed to come back and finish section 1 when they've had now all that time at home.
Can they start in the morning and finish in the afternoon?
Can they start in the morning and finish in the afternoon on the same section? Yes. I would say yes. I would say whatever you can do to get that section complete is your goal within the day that that section has been exposed to the student. So again, thinking of the security of the test and the results that we all use, we want to have those valid results. We don't want to then skew those by having this one kid that could be times 20 because 20 other people are doing it, going home in between a given section, exposing that section, coming back and performing differently than they might have otherwise. So that's the reason to the answer. We're not being mean. We're not being, it's just we've got to stay fair.
The frequently asked question sort of implies that kids need to finish before they go to lunch and stuff like that. Are you saying that they could leave, go to lunch and come back?
I'm saying that we could stay here all day and come up with every exhaustive permutation of problem that could arise within this given situation. Bottom line is that we do not want those items exposed in any unfair fashion. Period, amen, end of story.
So the answer to that question is students should, once they begin a session, they should complete it in one sitting, just like the FAQ says. And in one sitting, that might mean that you could permit a brief bathroom break, get a glass of water. But the students should not go to lunch, should not go to recess, should not have an extended break away from the test booklet. The potential for breaching the security of the items is greater when the students are mingling on the playground or during lunch. They can ask each other questions, they can help each other finish the test if that's how they choose to respond during those longer breaks. So please start the sessions early enough in the morning so that they can reasonably be completed by virtually all the students by the next big break.
That's okay. That's what we're here for.
All right. Can we have, like, because we have we don't have enough calculators for an entire school to give the math test at the same time, can we have like half of our 6th grade, if they're in the same testing group, half of our 6th graders do the math test, the other half of the 6th graders do the reading test, as long as they stay in the same testing group? Because of calculators.
Because of calculators.
I mean, it's not the best practice.
Exactly. And that's where, again, we could be exhaustive here of every possible scenario. What you have in front of you and what's up on the website and what we will always answer with is what we want to prescribe as best practice. Does that fall under best practice? No. Is that reality for you and how it has to be, and you're going to then ensure all the other extenuating circumstances that poses? It is what it is.
Calculators cost like $3. So it would be my preference that you buy a sufficient number of calculators to match the number of students you have enrolled in those tested grades. They're way cheap. It's not like when I was in high school in 1979 where you had to like mortgage your house to get a calculator.
Was there another question up in the back for during testing? Yes.
In regards to the recommended testing time, so for example, section 1 of reading says 80 minutes. At what point do you cut the students off and say, you're done?
80 minutes.
Can you say that? Can you make that loud and clear?
Yeah. He asked, as you heard the question, and I said without the mic in front of me, 80 minutes. That's why we give you those recommended testing times. However, I would also then draw your attention to the word recommended.
Well, that's...
So again, we have that ambiguous conversation of, can I require you? Is it mandated? Is the fire alarms going to go off in your building after 80 minutes? No. Do we want to ensure that there's consistency across the state? Yes. And I think that's where Deb's going to come with this answer, but let's have her chime in.
Life would be far simpler if we had a time to test. But we don't. We have an untimed test with recommended testing times. And I would say that if you have the vast majority of your students still working really hard at 80 minutes, extend the time longer. That's why we ask you start the testing session as early in the day as possible or as early in the afternoon as possible so that the students would have sufficient time to finish. We don't know your students, you do. If the vast majority of your students are done, the rest of them are just kind of messing around, not really focused any longer. You may take the booklets away. This is a professional judgment call. Each of us is highly trained. We are educators. We know when our students are working. We know when they're not. We know when they've given their best effort and when they're done. So individual test administrators will need to make that judgment call. And again, if you have the vast majority of your kids still working really hard and that particular recommended time limit has now arrived, I'd give them more time. And the test proctor might say, okay, I see everyone is still working. I'm going to give you another 15 minutes to finish up your work. You can do that. But you have to use your own professional judgment. It is an untimed test, but there are students who would work in perpetuity and still not complete the test. You all know those kids. You've seen them. You know that they'll even keep working. If you give them, till the 12th of never, they'll keep working. So please don't do that. We hear all the time that the test takes too long, and part of the problem is some people will allow students to work forever. Please don't do that. Be reasonable.
Any other questions? We're going to now go to after testing.
All right, I am going to go over after testing for building coordinators. So this is after testing. We will get into returning your materials a little bit later. We'll see some examples, and we have what we feel extremely beefed up and improved upon the return directions for both PAWS and SAWS. So in our world, we're very excited about that. As nerdy as that is, we are. So check the demographic information for students that you needed to hand grid. These are what we would call true walk-ins, students that don't have pre-ID labels. So make sure you check that demographic information. Check their Wiser IDs. We can tell story after story about how one grid got off on a Wiser ID. We can't match up the kid. So it's important to us that the Wiser IDs are gridded correctly. Destroy the pre-ID labels again, any extra labels that you have. Make sure to go ahead and destroy those. We don't need those back. So they can be destroyed on site. And then students who are no longer enrolled in your schools, unused labels. Oh, sorry. And then make sure the appropriate grade level assessment was administered. We've had a few of students who are in the system as grade 3, they take grade 4. There's no out of grade level testing for PAWS and or SAWS. So it becomes difficult to then score and report if we have record that they're grade 3 and then we receive a grade 4 test book back for them. And then remove any of the grid graph paper for PAWS, that scratch paper that we were just discussing. You can destroy that on site. We don't need that back. And for SAWS, there is draft paper allowed, and we do need that back. However, we want that in your non-scorable materials. The SAWS drafts are considered secure, and we do want them back. However, we don't score them. So anything on SAWS needs to be within the test and answer booklet for us to score. SAWS. Yeah, the writing test. The writing, not the reading, yeah. We do that too. All right. So again, collect and account for all of your test materials. Another inventory is good. And then for students who have received accommodations, make sure the appropriate boxes have been marked for them. We'll see a sample of this, box 8 and then box 7 on the different forms. We need to know, again, if they were tested with Braille large print or audio, and this is how we can tell. And you can see here, box 8, PAWS and SAWS test booklets. Oh, sorry, box 7. The answer document is box 8. All right. So here is a sample of a grade 3 through 5 header sheet. These have not changed whatsoever from last year. And we give detailed directions over here as to how to fill out each bubble or each grid or each box. This is for the school. So what we need when you return them is one header for your school and then a count of scorable materials over in box 5. So scorable materials. We want to know how much we're scoring. And you can put that on the top of box 1 when you return your materials. So if there's a variance from box 5 as to what we've scanned of about 10 plus or minus, we're going to give you a call, especially if it's minus. That means we're missing something. We don't want to miss anything. That means we are not scoring something. Errors in accounting do occur. We know that you guys are sitting there. 1, 2, 3, happens all the time. So we think a good variance is about 10. So that makes us worried. And here is a header for the grade 6 through 8 for the answer documents. And again, it's the same thing as last year. Fill it out. You do get pre-gridded, we call pre-gridded, header sheets for your school sites. So you can go ahead and use those. You'll get a few overage blank ones. But we, again, only need one for your school. And then packaging your materials. So the return directions for PAWS and SAWS are different. The main difference is that PAWS has a scorable and then a non-scorable return. SAWS just has one return. So you're going to need to separate your scorables from your non-scorable materials. And then again, SAWS is one shipment. And we ask that all non-scorable materials for SAWS actually are placed at the bottom of your return box and then banded. We have this funny little internal industry term that those brown bands that we provide for you are called belly bands. We don't know why, we're just told. And so we refer to these belly bands, so go ahead and band your non-scorable materials. Just my own personal preference, you can write on those bands, and what I would do is write non-scorable and throw that at the bottom of the box. So here, we have vastly and newly improved return directions. Here's the return directions for PAWS. All of this are in your manuals. You can read along with me if you want to. You don't need to. They're pretty extensive. And then the first box we have here is your UPS pickup. I do want to say a few things about UPS. I'm going to start now. And if you ever have a problem with UPS, we know some areas get quite remote in Wyoming and don't have a standard UPS pickup at your site. If UPS has ever said, oh, we need $4 to come to your site, or we don't come to that place, or we need $12 to come to your site, give us a call. So our call center, and then we'll pre-arrange a pickup for you. If we arrange it on your behalf, then UPS will go to your site. So we understand UPS can get a little tricky based on whatever hub they're shipping in and out of. So we try and make it as easy as possible. It's always better for you to schedule your own UPS pickup. You have a lot more control that way. But if you are having problems, definitely give us a call, and then we'll do everything we can to get UPS out there. So these are what the two headers look like. One is orange, one is blue for the different grade levels. That's all I'm really going to say about that one. And then I'm going to blow this sample out a little bit later. We'll see it. But for PAWS, it's important that UPS, the return label for UPS is a 1 stripe. That's a scoreable label. That comes to us quickly, and that's how we get scoring. That's how we get your materials. That's how we get results back faster. The next one is how to pack. Oh, and here's a sample. This is what we're so excited with ourselves for. So this is a sample of packing an actual box of your materials. Here's the header on top to be scored. Here are your grade levels. Way out here, I don't know if any of you remember from last year, grades 6 through 8, since their answer sheets receive a return envelope. So that's what that little picture is way out there, is that you put them in the envelope. You've got your header. You got your test and answer books for these grade levels. You got your orange header. Everything's filled out. Everything goes in the box. We also had a few problems last year with boxes that weren't sturdy enough. So when you received the boxes, they broke. And if we can go to the next slide. We understand that happened. We heard you very, very loud and clear. We went to our shipping and receiving department. We went directly to UPS, and we said, what's going on? What's going on in Wyoming? Why is this a problem? This isn't making any sense to us. And what they came up with, we were an actual test case. Actually, Wyoming was an actual test case in the UPS lab. And what they came up with, I know. So what they came up with is, first, your boxes had too many touch points within UPS when they shipped, and that wasn't a valid or reasonable even within UPS standards. And what they also found out is the tape, the actual sealing tape that we provide for you, wasn't strong enough. So we have upgraded our box weight. The thick, the tape. So we've upgraded the tape, the thickness of the tape, the strength of the tape. This is UPS recommended tape. UPS now recommends that you double tape both top and bottom of all your boxes. If you receive a box that you can't ship your materials back in, something happened to the box, maybe in the shipment, which we're knocking on wood is not going to happen this year, or on site something happens with your box, and you need a return carton, a return box, we do advise that you first look at, do you have a suitable box? And we do advise this with a bit of caution. So, we don't want a refrigerator box entirely full of your entire district, it will break and we won't get all of your test materials, and we don't want that. So if you have a question about boxes, I need a box, give us a call at the call center and we will provide you with another box for returning. So this pretty picture, which we have improved upon since last year, is theoretically a box packed up at the top, and then the double tape over here, and then also what we've improved upon. So then you put your label on. There was a question when we were in Afton about placing the UPS label under or over the double tape. And we will always say over because we need UPS to scan that barcode. We have also updated, I don't know if everybody remembers from last year, we had these bright green SC labels. They're really little circles, and we thought we didn't need them. And then we went to our shipping and receiving department, and they said, no, you do need them. And that's why they were in the boxes for Wyoming. And you guys told them not to use them, and we do need them. We're like, oh, oops. So this year, we have green SC labels. This indicates scorable. So on all of your scorable boxes, we do need this SC label. We ask that it's on the side of the box where you can see your label is at the top of the box. And then when it comes into our receiving department, they know that's a scorable box, and they know to get it on the line, to get it opened and scanned. And that helps us out. We'll get there. I got nice pictures for that too. So here is the non-scorable return directions. You can see the UPS label has 2 orange stripes for non-scorable returns, for PAWS. Then there is, so the other thing I wanted to just a little bit backtrack to scorable and non-scorable is that on the labels it'll ask you box 1 of 10, box 2 of 10. So this is also important to us, and we do QC on this. So even before we get into scanning your materials to see if all of your materials are there, you know, you said we have 300 and some documents and we scan them, we actually look at the number of boxes you've sent back. So if you told us, I have 10 boxes, we receive 8, we will probably start calling you. First thing we do is track, because we can see your tracking. So the first thing that we do is track. So know that we've done a little bit of pre-work before we call you. To find out where did these boxes go. But just to let you know that we do look at everything that comes in, and then we'll let you know if we're missing something right away. So again, this is a non-scorable UPS label. It has 2 stripes. And then Laura moves ahead. So this is how to pack your non-scorable box. And when I say the unopened at the bottom, this is the shrink-wrapped packages that you didn't use at all. You didn't open whatsoever. And then the unused test booklets. And then on top, used test booklets for grades 6 through 8.
Trick question.
Oh, trick question.
Why doesn't this box show me where the used test booklets go for grades 3 through 5, Rebecca?
Well, grades 3 through 5 are what we would consider a consumable test booklet, meaning all the responses are within grades 3 through 5. If you have students who responded within their test booklets in grades 3 through 5, as they should have, those go in the scorable materials. I passed. I get tested as well.
Question right here while we're on this.
Oh, yeah.
I promise it's fast.
Sorry, I'm not seeing who. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just as a clarification, when you're putting box 1 of 2, or 1 of 10, 2 of 10, does that include scorable and non-scorable?
Very
boxes,
good.
Or you label them separately.
Separately. So that's excellent question. I'm very, very glad you asked that. We had a lot of clarification in Afton about that. So the best way to view sending materials back to us is that PAWS scorable is its own shipment, and that goes first. PAWS non-scorable is its own shipment, and that goes second. SAWS is just 1 shipment, and that would go third. You basically have 3 shipments to send back to us. PAWS scorable, PAWS non-scorable, SAWS.
What about 3 through 8th grade? Can we combine separated?
3 through 8th grade.
We're one school?
You're one school. You want to combine 3 through 8th grade. So you have different headers.
Okay, so but when we do those shipments, those separate?
Oh, you can, yes, send that back to us in one shipment. That's fine.
Oh, in one?
That's, as long as the headers are correct, that's fine. In one box, we're okay. Okay. So here's a SAWS header. And again, this hasn't changed since last year. Grades 3, 5, and 7. You mark the grades tested. We want the total number of scorable documents coming back to us, so then we can count how much you have.
What if I have no one in grade 3?
So if you don't have any, you didn't test any students in grade 3, we don't have grade 3 students, please mark in here zeros. That indicates to us that we're not missing anything. We don't know that you don't have a grade 3, so we're going to be looking for that grade 3, where to go, why don't they have grade 3. We'll be looking, in TOMS, do we have an order for them, what's going on. So if you just mark, I don't have any students in grade 7, just mark zeros. And that'll help us out and let us know we're not looking for any other materials. So here's the SAWS return instructions. They're a little bit simpler, I suppose, than the PAWS. Again, the dates to return materials to us, materials to be returned, materials to be scored, materials not to be scored, and then not to be returned to us. And again, for SAWS, and we'll get into this, we do need the draft paper back as non-scorable.
For SAWS, draft paper and the graphic, the rough draft and stuff, but you don't need the math and all that stuff for
PAWS, right. So for PAWS, your math draft grid paper can be destroyed on site.
Can what?
Can be destroyed on site.
Oh, it can be destroyed on site.
Right. For SAWS, the draft that they do, we need that back in the non-scorables. We won't score it. We consider it secure. The student wrote an essay on a draft sheet. That's secure to us.
Well, I thought it was sitting here, you put all that stuff in one box.
We do. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Okay.
Belly bands.
Belly bands, thank you. You can come work at ETS now. So again, more instructions on how to fill out your header sheet, how to return your materials to us. So SAWS only has this one UPS orange stripe label. Everything's coming back to us as as scorable, I should say. So it's coming back to us quickly for SAWS. And this looks a little more complicated, but it's not, I promise. So this shows the belly bands in action. If you look at the picture way up there, they have two groups of materials belly banded. So that's how we would get the non-scorables back. And then the scorables on top. So just a little clarification, as you all probably know, is that for SAWS, there's just not a lot of non-scorable material because everything's a test booklet. So we send you test and answer booklets, they respond within the test and answer booklets, we score the test and answer booklets. So there's just not much non-scorable material to warrant a non-scorable material return. So the best, easiest way, fastest way to get everything back to us, put all the stuff that you don't use at the bottom and all the stuff we need to score on top. And again, this is just a larger call out for actually the PAWS administration when you return it, the one stripe versus the two stripes with UPS. Yes?
You know, every year it seems like we get phone calls in our district about missing materials
Yes.
or non-scorable.
Yes.
Like unused booklets. Do you want us to be inventorying what we're returning?
Yes.
On the non-scorable?
Yes. We need all booklets back. All test materials, all booklets, even if they're shrink wrapped, we need them back, but we need you to also know you return them to us. So the box contents sheet or the shipping form that you use to inventory all your materials coming in and out. It's just, yep, I got that packet, that shrink wrap packet right back in that non-scorable box.
Our extra books never leave our high school vault. And so, I don't know, we still get phone calls every year that...
Yes, you will. So I mentioned, sorry, I mentioned it a little bit earlier that last year we were a bit overzealous in our communication out to the field, out to you guys about materials that we did not receive because we hadn't completed our, what we would consider like a 3-point QC on all of our materials. So we're hoping that this year, now that we know that we little bit jumped the gun, that won't happen as much. And, you know.
But you still will return those shrink wrap box, those test booklets that were in the vault to us.
Always.
Yes. Yes.
Just had to get that.
Yeah.
Return all test materials.
We always feel like we're looking. I mean, we're looking underneath the carpet and we don't find them.
Keep looking though, that's
keep
good.
looking. Yeah. Keep looking. We're not doing, I mean, as you know, we're not doing it to police you or be mean or anything like that. This is just what our data shows us. Our scanners are showing us. That's why we call you. And then again, you know, test security, it's our business. It's what we do. And so, and you have to a little bit forgive us because we've heard every single possible test security issue throughout the world as to why this test booklet hasn't gotten back. I mean, you know, oh, you know, next year I found this book. Do you guys want this back? It goes to a different vendor sometimes. You know, I returned those, I swear. Well, they're not with us. We didn't scan them, I promise we don't have them. So it's all in this collective idea that we have to be very stringent with test security. So we appreciate very, very much that you are looking. Yes?
So I'm going to come back to that audio tape that I get a call on every year. I didn't see it up here. So I have an audio tape that goes in the non-scorable.
Yes.
And the booklet goes in the scorable.
Yes.
Okay.
This is just a curiosity. Is it possible for you guys to do a courtesy call to us who are pretty anal and know we have shipped everything that says, oh, we found this even though we called or sent the email that said we lost it? Is it possible to do that early before the scores all come out? Because then I spend time freaking out that I've lost it and I haven't.
So you know there's a missing book.
No, you guys email us and say, where is this? And I'm like, no, I sent it. But then we never hear back that you say,
oh, we found it.
Until the scores come out. That's a long time to sit
Agreed.
under.
Absolutely agreed.
Did I really mess up?
In theory, we probably wouldn't have enough resources to make that proactive courtesy call. But what will be different this year is that when we get that initial report from our warehouse on the serial numbers for the non-scorables, we will complete that 3-system check before we would actually deem it missing. Another caveat in all this is, generally speaking, any of those things that were not missing, that at one point the scanner thought was missing, that you guys told us wasn't, was always about non-scorables. And so we're not necessarily compromising a child's score. That would have been flagged or caught long before that July cycle, if you would. And we would have, and that would have been an example of Rebecca knowing at just an inbound, if we were missing a scorable, which we do even care a little bit more about, not that test security is not important, that would have been even a more direct one-to-one call. At this point, it's really house cleaning on these non-scorables with some of these test booklets that didn't serial number match up. And why we made that call as preliminarily as we did, I would still say it did, by the way, generate a lot of people who did find things in the vault or in another office that they forgot they had secured them there, but they weren't where the other books were, and that was really good that we found that. So it's a little bit of a crapshoot, but we will not be so quick on that call in July without going through the other database that it has to clear, which is what didn't happen last year.
So I believe we,
Yeah, this last slide.
yeah, we've gone over this.
Okay.
So we will do some Q&A now on returning materials, and then we'll get to test security. So I'm going to go up this way. Yeah.
Last year, when the materials were shipped to us, we were missing some items that were said to be shipped to us. And so we notified ETS. But then, when we shipped everything back, you were aware that they weren't with us. We get a communication saying that we were missing these items. And so, I mean, I guess, is there communication within your department? Because then we have to go back and search through our records, because maybe we don't remember all of that. And so we have to go back and start searching to make sure that we did ship everything back.
Same answer as we've said thus far, that she can repeat for the mic.
So again, it's a resource issue for us. So we do need you to notify us. We are missing this set of test booklets. And when you inventory your materials when they come in, mostly because we need to make sure that all of your students have enough materials to test on test day. And then it's it's kind of a circle with this kind of situation. You didn't ship us, XYZ serial numbers. We're missing this. We don't need any extra materials. We fill out a form. We let you know, and then we call you and say, hey, we're missing this stuff. And like, yeah, we told you you're missing this stuff. That gives us just kind of the heads up. Go back in our records, and then note, they did tell us earlier that these were missing. So it's again, it's not ideal. And it's a bit of a resource in our area, but yeah, just let us know. We told you already, and we're okay. Thank you. We'll look.
Also on the box issue, last year we had 2 boxes that came to us that were just busted wide open, and I know that you said that you're working on getting that solved. But I contacted you and told you I didn't have enough boxes to ship materials back in, and we didn't have any suitable boxes. And so ETS said, we'll get some boxes shipped to you. We never saw those boxes. And so we packed everything in the boxes we had to the point of them busting at the seams, and we wrapped tape every which way, but until we ran out of tape to make sure they didn't come apart.
So, I apologize. I wouldn't have known that you didn't get those. Obviously, you're annoyed and don't want to have to call us back again, but I would actually say that you need to call us back again, because somewhere along the line, someone didn't get that shipment to you. Those boxes should have come to you, and that's in our standard operating procedure. And I'll repeat this again for the mic. So again, exactly so far what should have happened did happen, in that you call and we say we'll get boxes out to you. The fact that you did not get them is a problem. As annoying as it would be for you, I would actually then want you to call us back again and say, I did not get these boxes. You inevitably did what you needed to do, and that's fine. But I didn't know that somewhere along the line those boxes didn't get to you, so I couldn't have corrected it. But that's what should have happened, and we need to get you those boxes if you call to order them. And for that, I apologize. One of the other improvements we made, as you mentioned, when the boxes actually came to you, they had already busted open. We also, in the UPS work that we did during the off-season, we had too many touch points. By the time that the box actually reached your site, it might have been touched by a handler maybe 8, 9, or 10 times. And that far exceeded the standard that UPS sets, which should never usually exceed 4. So the manhandling of these boxes were deteriorating the quality of how they had been, what they thought should have been standard shipping. We've also, in addition to the thickness of the tape and the art on the tape, we've also eliminated the number of touch points. And so ETS now actually direct ships into the state of Wyoming before it even gets to UPS, to ensure that from Warehouse to Wyoming is already just one touch point, not 3, not 5. So then, if it's going to take another 3 touch points within the UPS system to get to you, that's still within reason. But that is why that would have happened, is that for that box to have been received like that, and that should have been eliminated with the steps we corrected. Deb?
So one other thing that I would add to that is we at the Wyoming Department of Education have a really good relationship with educational testing services, but I realize that rarely do you people in the field deal with either Lauren or Rebecca directly. And so please first start with the ETS help desk, make your phone call, say, geez, I didn't get my boxes, you all said you were going to send the boxes, I didn't get them. If you don't get them, please call one of us in the assessment team. We have like a red bat phone that we call Lauren or Rebecca on and say, hey man, you all were supposed to send some boxes and it didn't happen, and they will make sure it happens. So if you're not getting satisfaction with the customer service desk, please call me and I will make sure that you get exactly what you need.
And I'll just sit here and nod emphatically, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. You are all our customer, and so that pains me to now know that something didn't work the way it was supposed to work, and that's what we'll be doing when we go back, because I wouldn't have known that otherwise.
No. Question. Oh. Thank you.
I'm looking at page 40 of the building coordinator's manual where it shows how to pack the PAWS materials to return. And I thought I heard you say earlier that the reason it doesn't list used test booklets for grades 3 through 5 is because we wouldn't have any.
No, they're scoreable.
Yeah, right, that's what I heard you say. But I think that's where I got the email terror last year saying, we don't have the stuff, and I sent it back because I did have test books that were grade 3 through 5 that were used but were not scoreable, because what had happened is I put labels on them and they before the test window started, and then I had kids moved so those were no longer necessary. So I put them in as unscoreable, and so then I got the email saying we don't have this stuff, and it was unscoreable instead of inscorable. So if that happens, or if for some other reason there is a used book that is not scoreable, how do we make sure that you know you have that and you don't email us saying we don't have that? How do we pack that?
It would go in your non-scoreable return box. And then make sure that your header does not include those students.
Which is what I think I did, but still we got told. We
You did it all right.
I can't say 20 more times. We are really apologetic on what we were a little overzealous in making that campaign to some degree. At the same token, we treat test security as serious as we do, and the fact that it did yield some outstanding test booklets, it did do its job. But that is why we are not doing that again. I apologize. But you did everything right,
you did.
And that's how it should be worded in the building coordinator manual. And thank you for bringing that up, because that's another extenuating circumstance that we probably didn't mention. That you will have, in this case, a used test booklet that is deemed unscorable.
What is the right on that? Like non-scoreable?
You can. You can, absolutely. Absolutely. If you want to take a pen and write non-scoreable across that test booklet, throw it in the non-scoreable materials, absolutely 100% helps us. Yes. We don't mention it because it's an extra step for all of you. It's a lot of work. We understand that. We don't want to take up all your time with, this is not scoreable, Rebecca. So, we don't really outwardly mention that, but if you have the time and the resources to do that, that's hugely helpful to us.
Sorry to interject again. One thing that I want to tell you about is this overzealous test booklet tracking from last year that I hear you all expressing angst about. As an example of one of the ways, not just the tape and the busted up boxes, but as another example of the way in which WDE works with ETS directly, is we talked with ETS last year about, oh my gosh, we're getting all these calls and concerns from the field about, they know they sent in test booklets, but you all are sending them emails saying we didn't get them. And it's one of those things that we talked with them about, and so that's why they're kind of ratcheting that kind of communication down, rethinking processes at ETS so that less of those kinds of emails, phone calls, et cetera, are generated this year. So I believe that your experience this year will be better, in large part because of the feedback that we got from you all. You know, test security is important, and I will hammer on that topic here shortly, but we do need to have a balance between not striking terror in the field about missing test booklets versus ensuring that we really do know where each and every test booklet is and we have them accounted for. So we've adapted that process based on your feedback.
So do we have any more questions about returns? We're going to move on to test security.
So I do think you've heard now, overstated perhaps, or not intentionally of course, that we do care a lot about test security. So we did want to just take a minute and review again what that entails and or what's involved. As you know, everyone's primary goal, and that includes you guys, is to protect the integrity of the testing process, both PAWS and SAWS. So that is accomplished, we believe, by A, securing the test materials at all times, and B, ensuring that only appropriate preparation for the administration of the test happens at your site. Why? And we don't want to just come off all the time badgering you about test security. We really want to make sure you understand what's at stake and why we care. And the number one reason is that first bullet, is that you as the state within Wyoming do make inferences about the performance on these tests. If we believe security's been violated or there's at any point a concern about the validity, we then no longer can make those inferences with the confidence that we want to be able to. Also, if there's any type of a breach at the item level, a particular test question, for example, that can indeed result in that item and or bank of items being compromised. We have a very sophisticated plan at ETS, how we work through multiple administrations, multiple banks of items. Therefore, it is utmost concern for us to protect those banks. If we believe that they've been compromised, then we would have to actually redevelop new items for a new bank. That's very expensive. We also, and certainly I think everyone in this room never wants any one student to have an unfair advantage over another student. We also, you are all in the business in public trust. We at ETS are as well. We don't want to sense out in the papers that anything's been violated regarding that. People start talking, people think that there was a breach that wasn't dealt with accordingly. That can and would violate public trust. No one wants to be on the front page of your local newspaper related to anything for PAWS or SAWS. And last but not least, but also pretty critical at the WDE's standpoint, is that we never want to be in a position where we have to invalidate any score that would then result in any difference of an AYP calculation. And or you never want to be in a situation where a parent doesn't get an individual student report for their student. So this is why we continue to try to talk about this and make sure that you guys know where we're coming from, because I believe you're all coming from the same page and you're all with us on all these points. But sometimes it just doesn't feel like, or you don't really remember all that. Now, involving test security, who does it involve? Simply put, everyone. So we talk about the test administrator training that you as building coordinators or district coordinators are responsible to conducting. That is in fact for the very purpose of ensuring that you have test security at your site at all times. That in fact would extend to the secretary that actually is handling and boxing up and returning for you and or for the department all the tests into the box. If they are handling actual test booklets with items, therefore they are no different than the test proctor who goes through that same training. So that secretary I would have go through the test administrator training, because they are handling the items, they're handling the tests. What to do when it actually happens is very straightforward. This hasn't differed. You would actually, again, create an irregularity report as we talked. You would then call that in or send it in. You would involve the district. And we would then subsequently, between ETS and WDE, possibly also need to continue an involvement with the district depending on the actual violation. So we actually had this exact slide last year, and it was very helpful, and I think we talked this through. And it was the WDE that put this together for us. And it just, again, to understand what's going on. First and foremost, when we receive the IRR, it comes into ETS, we will then actually review it. And obviously we know it's very rare that we would actually then receive one of these IRRs that actually deems a breach in security. Should it, however, though, be even remotely touching that net of possibly a violation of test security, we then involve WDE. And then at this point forward, it's a WDE decision and it's a WDE process in which they're going to work with you and the district and those that were involved to kind of vet through what's at stake, what happened, and what consequences to take. Should there be consequences, that would at that point come directly from Deb in step 5, in which she would formally document that. And if indeed the consequence was that a score had to be invalidated, that would be the letter that comes forth from her. So we have her here, and should there be any other questions, what I wanted to do is pause and allow, if there was any questions specific to test security related to either this process, or if you had any other examples that we didn't talk about earlier that we want to bring up to ensure that you're comfortable with understanding exactly what you can and cannot do. I think they're a good bunch, Deb.
I know.
So we'll move on to the next slide, which again we briefly touched on, and I will actually have Deb step up and talk about erasure analysis.
So we at the department have worked with ETS to coordinate this presentation so that it comes really in 3 segments: before, during, and after testing. And we do that purposefully because test security is touched before, during, and after testing. We work really hard to make most of our test security practices ones that are proactive. That is, we want everyone to be trained, and that includes people who are handling test booklets who do not administer the test booklet. So if you're a building coordinator and you know that you always rely on the school secretary to help you organize the test booklets, get everything all in the right order and the header sheets all right, that secretary then needs to also be trained on test security practices. Anyone who touches the test booklets needs to be trained on test security practices. Test security is really paramount. It's important because of the public trust. We administer a statewide assessment that's used for accountability, that's used for all kinds of things, and it's our job, our collective job, to make sure that the inferences we can make from that test are accurate, that those test results validly represent our students' work. So we work really hard on the front end to make sure that before, during, and after testing, we have ensured appropriate test prep practices, that we have handled the test booklets appropriately, lock them up when they need to be locked up, as in when students are not working directly in them. So that we do all of those things appropriately. We count and recount and inventory and re-inventory to make sure we have accounted for all of our test booklets. Then you all ship them off. They go to ETS for scoring. A couple of years ago, ETS provided for us the first ever erasure analysis reports that have the department looking at excessive erasures, which I'm pleased to say, and it's important for you all to know, just because there are a lot of erasures, because Johnny got off on his 7th grade answer sheet and he got 1 row off, and now suddenly the whole answer sheet's messed up, and now he has to erase the whole thing and fill in all the correct answers in the right rows and columns. We know those kinds of things happen. But whenever an erasure rate within a school, grade, and subject exceeds 4 standard deviations, that's way far out there on that normal curve, from the state average number of erasures for that same grade and subject, ETS flags it for us. An erasure in and of itself, an erasure flag in and of itself, does not mean that anything inappropriate has occurred. It only means exactly what it is. That is, there are an awful lot of erasures there, and it's way different than the statewide average. Another thing that we do is to take a look at large gains analyses. And the irony here is not lost on me. We like to see at the state level, just as you do at the district level, large gains from students between grades 3 and 4, say, or 4 and 5. But we analyze gains across the state, and we flag large gains Whenever individual students' gain exceeds the statewide average in that same grade and subject, again by more than 4 standard deviations, we flag that as another potential indicator of what we call an irregularity. Why do we call it an irregularity? Because it in fact is irregular. These are outliers, both the erasure flags and the large gains flags. We notify superintendents whenever we see either large gains or the high number of erasures. We notify the superintendents of the grade and subject and school where those occurred. We have an obligation to do that. The federal government will quite likely issue new peer review guidelines for statewide assessment systems very soon that requires state education agencies to have such data forensics in place post-testing. So these are all collectively measures that we use because we are all responsible for test security. We have a responsibility to the children that you serve, the families who get the results, the community that consumes the results. We all have an obligation to ensure test security. So WDE is doing its part by both training you, providing resources so you can train others, and by doing the post-test data forensics. Any questions on those? Great. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Deb. So in the interest of time, which I think we're out of, let's just go to, if there's any questions about homeschool students, everything is here on this slide. You have that, and you can ask us offline. But I do want to now just get to general questions before we let you guys go.